doesn't make sense through life. You're going to bend, you're going to flex your spine, you're going to rotate your spine. And so we have to start to look at like, okay, how do I start to become comfortable in those movements in a more robust core in order to then maybe prevent back pain? Welcome back to another episode from the Optimal Body Podcast. I'm Doc Jen.
And I'm Dr. Dom.
And today we're going to discuss if core exercises are really what you should be doing for back pain, because that gets prescribed still all the time. So let's talk about it. Before we dive into what is a myth, what is true, what is the core, and what should we really be focusing on when it comes to low back pain, we want to make sure that you don't miss out on these episodes that come out, not only on these episodes, but on other podcasts where we're just talking about pain and movement, mobility, different things that you could do. So please hit the subscribe, hit the bell so that you don't miss out on any reminders. I do lives now as well. That's like a new thing that I'm trying to do. And I just want to continue to hear your feedback, see what you need. So comment below, let us know how these videos are resonating and if there's anything else you want to continue to learn from us.
Should you do core exercises for low back pain? Yes or no? I want to hear what your answer is right away.
Depends.
BS. I'd say yes.
You're going to say yes?
Yeah.
I'm going to say, here's what I'm going to say. When someone tells you, oh, your low back hurts, you should just do core exercises, that is a no.
That's not the full picture. What I would say is that's like 3 pieces of the 20-piece puzzle.
And what does it mean when you should do core exercises? Should I do crunches? Should I do planks? Like, how is that going to ultimately help when I'm bending down and picking something up and I hurt my back?
Yeah. Oh, you need to strengthen your core. Like, what's that mean?
What does that mean? Why is that really going to help?
The myth that we wanted to start out with is that a stronger core, quantitatively, a stronger core does not correlate or mean that you're going to have less instance of back pain.
But when we're talking about core, we really have to look at the entire picture. And we've talked about this endlessly on a lot of podcasts now, where the core is our main pillar, right? From our shoulders all the way down to our pelvis. And when we're talking about it, we're talking about a 360-degree aspect of the front, sides, and back.
Because when we talk about developing a stable and strong core, we're talking about how all of these components work in synergy with one another. Also, not just when you're sitting still or laying on the ground, but when you're up, about, moving, and doing things.
Does it make sense through life? You're going to bend, you're going to flex your spine, you're going to rotate your spine. And so we have to start to look at like, okay, how do I start to become comfortable in those movements in a more robust core in order to then maybe prevent back pain? Again, not necessarily this exercise is going to create this result, but what can I start to do to create a more resilient me?
Isometric core exercises, or exercises where you're not moving like a plank or a side plank, or laying on your back and just even pressing into your knees, or doing breath work, which I guess there's some movement there because you might be moving in the rib cage, but your spine is not moving. Mm-hmm. And so that's a way to really start increasing the endurance of these core muscles. And when we increase the endurance, we overall increase that stability and our ability to fight fatigue off throughout the day. I think a lot of the times when we have these instances of back pain, or when we're doing a certain movement or bending over, we tend to be in a fatigue state. We're not coordinating and using the strength that we do have well enough. And that's when we might move or tweak our back in a certain way that irritates something and that sticks with us for a while.
But the best way to kind of start to create this isometric bracing is really understanding this abdominal idea of bracing so that we start to coordinate the front with the sides, with the pelvic floor, with the breath, with the back, all together. And almost learning how to create a natural weightlifting belt. Like, sometimes I think people jump too quickly to weightlifting belts, and I get they're super necessary if you're lifting really heavy loads, right? If you're starting to really go aggressive in the gym. But before you get there, learn how to make your own natural weightlifting belt within your body that coordinates all these muscles together. And planks or a curl up, I think, is the first one, right? So just the thinking of this kind of top abdominal muscle region and curling up and holding without bringing in the psoas and the legs involved in it. So how can I start to flex and use my upper abdominal region and my anterior core, so the front of your core, without overutilizing the hips and being able to hold that. A side plank, a bird dog, that kind of makes you offset. So if you think about being on all fours and extending the opposite arm and leg, it kind of wants to make your body rotate, but can you stiffen up and kind of avoid that rotation? Or same thing, like if you were in a single leg glute bridge and you kind of come up, would your hip drop, or kind of can you maintain that stability?
I was going to say it hits all of those major planes of motion, all the 3 lines with that curl up. And if you've never done a curl up this way, like if you're used to doing full sit-ups and you feel it in the front of your hips, this is an exercise that will really help you just feel it in the front of that abdominal region by focusing on just lifting your sternum towards the ceiling and pinching that rib cage almost down towards your sternum and doing it nice, controlled, and slow. And 10 reps of those, you really should start to feel that soreness and that pump start in the front of that abdominal region. Can't do a bird dog at the grocery store when you're holding a child under one arm and reaching for some groceries with the other arm. Yeah, a bird dog is not going to help you in that scenario. That's where we have to translate what those exercises bring us to function in real life.
There is a core plan as well within Gen Health that you can look at, because it starts at this baseline. It starts at these isometrics. How does my pelvic floor coordinate with my breath? How does my pelvic floor coordinate with my TVA and with my back? And how does that coordinate whether I'm on my back, my stomach, my side? And we go into all these different isometrics first before we then start to get it a little bit more dynamic and rotation and all that kind of stuff. So if you go through the core plan and the different phases, you'll kind of get this experience that we're talking about of what the core really is. Again, the core plan is great if you're really just trying to focus on understanding this coordination and the stability aspect. However, this alone isn't going to help your back pain.
If your back hurts, do you do core exercises at the beginning? I said yes, because I think that's one component, but another component for many people might be restrictions in mobility elsewhere, like restriction at the hips. If you have foundational and significant restrictions at the hips, you're going to likely compensate through your low back because our low back is one of the most mobile and free areas of the body. And so if we have restrictions at the hip, we're probably going to have compensation there. I mean, that's what I did throughout a lot of my collegiate career. I had really significant limitations at the hip. I still do. And I would use back extension to compensate for that. And I got myself in trouble sometimes when lifting heavy weights, doing stuff like that. Same with our upper back. I mean, if we don't have a lot of extension in the upper back, where are we going to find that extension? What about the neighbor, the low back?
Where we kind of look at the body, mobility, stability, mobility, stability. It's mobility at the upper back, stability at the low back. Mobility at the hips is a really basic way to start to look at it and really get that understanding of where could I be lacking in my body that I'm now compensating other places. I mean, we continue to see that low back pain continues to present like as non-specific more and more, right? We can't exactly pinpoint it because there's just a lack of association within the evidence that it's 100% because of awkward postures, or 100% because this facet is out, or 100% because your pelvis is rotated this certain way, or this MRI looks this certain way, right? Like we just have a lack of association, which means we can't say because my MRI looks like that, this is why I have back pain. We can't look at that. So we have to start expanding and looking at other factors. And what we do see in the evidence is really there's no long-term difference between what kind of core program you end up doing. Most all of them end up helping. And why? Because we're moving.
Because you're moving, because there are so many physiologic benefits to exercise in general and to loading our muscles, the amount of endorphins we release, the way it works fluids through our system, the way it helps with our circulatory system and our blood pressure and heart rate and everything. There are so many physiologic cascades that happen in our body when we start on a consistent training program.
Improve that mobility above and below the low back. We can start general strength training. Like not only is that going to help to build a more robust body in general, a robust mover, but we're also going to start to have just psychological changes that happen, biological changes that happen when we start strength training that are so beneficial throughout the entire system.
Yeah, it's funny. I think of different patients that I've had in the past that are in their later years, 60 plus. And this happened for multiple people where, you know, their biggest thing is like, I can't bend down and pick something up from the floor. This would happen a couple sessions in. I start out doing some of the modalities, getting them breathing, getting them starting to develop some of that core stability, and then you have them pick a 10-pound kettlebell or a 10-pound weight off of like a 2-foot high box. And 3 to 4 sessions in, you start lowering the box to 18 inches, to 1 foot, to 6 inches. And then 2 weeks later, they're picking up this 10-pound weight off the ground and they almost don't make the connection in their mind. It's like, oh my gosh, like I just did it.
Yeah.
And that's how you start to reduce some of that fear of these movements that in the past you associate with immediate pain. But now you're starting to build this resiliency in the body. You're starting to show the body that, hey, I can be safe, flexing forward, squatting down and picking up something from the ground. And that is a massive component in pain. Like we said, especially and more so persistent pains and longer term pains.
And we rotate through life. We don't walk like a robot. As one foot comes in contact with the ground, we rotate the opposite direction in our upper back. And so we have to think, if I'm rotating naturally through life and yet my program is only stabilization, then I'm missing a whole component of functionality just living as a human. It's hugely important that, yes, we want this stability and identifying how to coordinate these muscles together in an isometric way, but we also need to then coordinate the muscles with the legs, with the glutes, with the shoulders through this rotational pattern, through bending and flexing and extending and becoming strong. And let's just end with, outside of movement, make sure you're sleeping, you're getting physical activity, you're getting a lot of love from people around you, and you're working on any depressive symptoms, stressors, and your mental health, because this all plays a huge role in what's happening with low back pain.
Yeah, so whatever it is in those areas of mental health, emotional health, whether it's spirituality, finding a spiritual community that you can be a part of, meditation, mindfulness, journaling, breath work, all options.
Releasing anger, that's a huge one for women.
Going out and smashing some...
Yeah, come on. Screaming a little inappropriate settings, you know?
Yes.
Let it out. Cry.
Not in the middle of that grocery store when you have one kid under your arm, but once you get home and can scream into a pillow and smack the pillow on the top of your mattress. Great way to let out some of that emotional tension that you might be holding in the body. Thanks for joining us for another PT Pearl from the Optimal Body podcast, all on should we strengthen our core if we have back pain? What do you think? Have you had issues with back pain or core strength? If so, comment below. Please let us know what you think. Also, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you always know when these new PT Pearl topics are coming out and when Jen is putting out other videos on pain and movement related issues. And of course, we'll see you next time on the Optimal Body Podcast.